Welcome. My name is Rich Dixon. I'm the Senior Director of Innovative Learning at Hāpara. And I'm joined today by my good friend and former colleague, Andre Daughty. Andre is an educational consultant with Daughty Enterprises. The two of us have been classroom educators, and we've held numerous positions within schools and districts. And today we're going to be focused on talking about equity. Specifically, we're going to explore educational equity, the title of this presentation. It's going to be conversational in tone, and we look forward to exploring this really important topic with you. So Andre, welcome.
Hi, how you doing? I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So let's start with the very basics. What is educational equity?
Yeah, educational equity is really simple. It's giving every child everything that they need in order to succeed. Period, point blank. Whether that be me as a kid who didn't have pencils in his area, and that was the only thing stopping me from actually learning. Where I remember those days of me using a crayon to actually do the work because I couldn't find a pencil, because I lost a pencil, or because I loaned out a pencil to someone. So educational equity could be something as simple as that, ensuring that every kid has that pencil. The ones who need it, that pencil is there for them. Or it could be on a different scale of different supports and resources, and having those students who need that extra help right there, readily available to them, without the red tape, without the politics, without all of the hoo-ha-ha, but having what that student needs in order for him, her, they to succeed. Educational equity is literally every child receiving whatever they need in order to learn and to grow academically.
Okay, that's great. And let's start to unpack it maybe a little bit more systemically as well. So
Yeah.
let's start from the school systems level and maybe work our way more granularly into how this can manifest within a classroom. Again, a broad topic, but trying to make it more concrete. So from a school systems level, Andre, what are some of the conditions that you think are things that school leaders and others can be doing to foster more educational equity?
Ooh, so that is a loaded question, and I love it. Um, I get the opportunity to really serve schools, and as you can see, I'm a young man, a young Black man in America. And so there have been, I can't many tell you how many times I've walked inside of a school and immediately see the inequities after that first step walking in. We'll give you a perfect example. I went to visit one school, right? And here I am, guy with a bow tie, nice, smiling, glasses. I walk in, and as soon as I walked in, I had the badge on and everything, and I'm trying to find my way to the office so I can talk to the principal and get the day started. And one student came up to me, looked at me just like this, and said, "Stranger danger, stranger danger, stranger danger." And I'm shocked at this because this is the first thing I walk into. Uh, then the teachers run out of nowhere. They come out like Secret Service, right? And then they're looking at me and they see that I have my badge on. And they question me as if I'm a stranger danger. Little did they know that I was a part of the administrative team. But they come and they question me as a stranger danger. And the questioning went from innocent of, "Hi, how are you? Welcome. Are you looking for the office?" to, "What are you doing up in here? Are you a stranger?" And giving me the side eye and the looks and all of that good stuff. And so here I am walking inside of this school, and utterly embarrassed. I'm a little bit nervous because I look around the school, and of course, I am the only Black person there. I'm the only person of color there. And I noticed right then and there how welcoming I was not.
Mhm.
While also standing there, I'm looking around the walls and the halls of that class, of the vestibule, of that entryway, and there's no diversity on the walls. There's no anything. All of the walls are white. All of the spaces are white. All of the Hall of Fame and partners of our community, not a single person is diverse. And so then that brings me comfort to know, okay, I get it. I see what I'm dealing with in this moment. Of course, I am a stranger danger because they have never seen someone like me walk inside of their school. And so here I am walking. And of course, they take my badge and they pull it off and they look at my badge and it shows a specific school district. Uh, and now they're looking at me like, who are you? Because I've never seen you before. And one person actually says that, who are you? And then right before I speak, the principal comes out and the principal says, hey, Andre, welcome. And so now I can have a different conversation with this principal. And of course, the teachers are now embarrassed because they just realized what they've done and who they did it to. And so they start backtracking and just try to explain to the principal what was happening. Well, little Tommy said stranger danger, and we were just protecting little Tommy. And the principal replied, but this is Andre. He's got a badge. Now we can have that conversation of what is equity. What does it actually look like when you walk into a system or into a school? And so that afternoon, Rich, man, it was really, really fun because I got to introduce myself to the staff during staff meeting. And I gave them my official title and who I am, and told them that I was born and raised right here in this area, in this city, in this blah, 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 and how my mother was an educator and how I da, 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 da. And then at the end, I hit them with the hard truth and that reality. And I said, one thing what we'll really need to talk about when I come back on tomorrow for the full day workshop is, are you treating everyone equal when they walk into this school?
Mhm.
And I specifically looked at 2 or 3 of the teachers who were overly aggressive. And I also looked at the other teachers who just sat there and watched.
Mm.
And I said, now, when we talk about educational equity, yeah, we're going to talk about the school books. And yeah, we're going to kind of try to make it as easy and simplified as possible because we don't want to offend. But there's some systems in place and some procedures in place at this school that did not make everyone welcome. And if I didn't feel welcome going into a school that I serve, knowing the principal and some of the staff members that I serve there, then what about the strangers and the visitors who do walk in?
That's right.
And it was a really strong, strong workshop and delivery those next days about as well, Rich, man. So when we're talking
Oh,
about what is
powerful
educational
story.
equity, it's that right there.
Yeah, so we talk about environment, the conditions, right, that are welcoming and the ways that we represent our community on the walls. And then I think as we go maybe a step even further down and you start to talk a little bit about it, let's bring out maybe even a subject that's really sensitive in the United States right now: content, curriculum, even the way we teach. Andre, you are amazing at helping people understand better teaching methodologies, how to improve upon
Yeah.
their craft and whatnot. So let's go that next level down.
Yeah, that walkthrough, it was really weird, Rich, right? Because now we're doing a walkthrough. This is afternoon, so this is like post lunch recess time, and so I'm doing a walkthrough because you want to see the culture of the school, you want to feel the culture of the school, and at the same time, perhaps that was just the outlier. Maybe that was, and so the principal and myself, we do a walkthrough of the school, and of course, they take you to the great classrooms first where they're showing all of the great behavior and showing, all of the engaged students, which I don't mind. That's great. But as soon as you walked in, once again, I'm looking at the walls. I'm looking at the books on the shelves. I'm looking for the content. Elementary, I am looking at the crayons. Do you have crayons that look like the colors of my skin? Or do I gotta use a black, a brown, and a white to shade to make it? Do I've gotta use a 0.5 pencil and lightly color to show my darker tones? I'm looking for all of these things. So doing the walkthrough, Rich, I did that. I looked on the walls to see, was there any diversity on the walls? On the Hall of Fame, are there any people in your community that, no? Okay. All right. What about the library books? We took a walk to the library books. And once again, at the elementary level, library books, they normally pick out some and put them on the top of the shelves, like, hey, check us out, look at us. And I'm looking for those. And I only see animals as protagonists. And in my head, I'm saying, oh, these are situations we need to discuss.
Yeah.
Because perhaps they just don't know, or perhaps they do know and choose not to show it.
Yeah.
So from that teacher ground level, that's
Mm.
the first thing I'm looking for. If I were a parent walking inside of that classroom, is there content that looks like my children? Is there anything on the wall that looks like my kid? If not, what are they doing to address it?
I think it's a great one. And then as we think too about even the way that teachers go about, as we go about our craft within the
Yeah,
classroom, what are some ways that you feel that can promote students to kind of reframe what you had said there, seeing themselves in the learning, or ways that in which they can be honored and respected so they feel a part, every
yeah,
student feels part of that learning community so that they can be successful.
yeah. That's actively seeking out content and actively finding books or stories or anything that looks like the students that they serve. And even on top of that, if they don't look like the students that they serve, still bringing in that content so they can grow from it. On Twitter right now, it went viral for a little bit, but Netflix has this show about a little black girl with big, poofy, natural, afro loving hair. And while she's out there, the picture showed a little girl who looked just like this cartoon character or animated character, and she's smiling at the TV. And the mom snapped the picture.
Mhm.
And the mom's caption was something like, "This is the first time my daughter actually saw someone who looks like her." And to see the smile on the face of that child, that matters. So inside of our classroom, it matters. It matters if we are sitting in an elementary setting and we're at carpet time and we're all at our little circle and our squares and our colorful areas where we are. And then a book comes out and that book looks like the students that they serve. That matters.
Absolutely, it does. And another thing I think about too, a lot of times, is how we as educators actually engage with students.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I know in my own practice as an educator, my own journey as an administrator, being in a lot of different classrooms, sometimes expectations aren't always equal. Sometimes there can be lowered expectations for certain
Oh, yeah.
populations of students. So let's talk a little bit about, as an educator, how can we show up, not just in terms of what we have displayed, that's important, but also how we engage with students. Do you have any tips or insights from your own experience and recommendations?
Yeah, the stereotypes as teacher, when you walk inside of these classrooms and you have these new students and you have all these students, you've got to dispel your stereotypes. You got to throw away those biases. You got to check yourself. A famous quote from O'Shea Jackson Jr. or Ice Cube, for those who love hip hop, he had a song called "Check Yourself Before You Wreck Yourself."
Mhm.
And that self-evaluation, that self-check matters before you even walk into the room to teach a lesson. Because if you go inside of that classroom or go inside that lesson thinking to yourself, these kids aren't going to learn it, so I might as well dumb it down. Of course they won't learn it because you dumbed it down. The expectations are everything when it comes to students. And I
It-
think that there was a study somewhere on that a while back, or at least the story that I can remember from a friend sharing. There were two different teachers. One teacher had the high group students, the other teacher had the low group students. But the administrator told the teacher with the lower academic level students, said, "You all are the advanced students," and told the teacher that too. And the teacher's like, "Really?" So the teacher was really like rigorous in the instruction and gave those kids everything. And those kids were rising to that occasion. The principal told the other teacher, "You've got the lower academic students." And so the teacher taught, basic skills and didn't push their thinking, didn't give them the critical thinking, and they went lower. So at the very end of the story, the principal comes back and tells the teachers, like, "Look at your data, look at the things." And then the principal told them, "You actually had the lower academic kids and you had the higher kids." And it was a shocking moment of those teachers.
yes.
So if we as educators go inside of these classrooms thinking that our kids can't, they won't.
Yeah,
We go and think
absolutely.
that they're scholars. Of course they're scholars. Tap into their awesomeness, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think something that's closely related to that is a question I ask myself often.
Uh-huh.
How might we build the capacity and agency for all students, every single student in a classroom, to be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to take ownership of their own learning? And I think some of that for myself has been revisiting my own assumptions about a student.
Mhm.
And I will spare storytelling for the moment, but I can well imagine that you have some insights on that as well. So do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I had a colleague, and colleague had like this group of students that came inside this colleague's class. Everybody kept telling the colleague, "Ooh, you got that student. Ooh, you know, they were like, that one, that one, that one. Oh, those are the troublemakers, and oh, that one Miss Talk a lot, or you know, and really labeled all these kids. And so I remember going to the teacher's class, and I was like, "How you doing, man?" He's like, "Man, life is great." And I was like, "Wait a minute, but didn't our colleague say that you had?" He said, "Listen, I didn't listen to any of them. These students came inside of my class. I told them I didn't care what you did last year. This is a new year. Be yourself." And so he started to see where the talker who talked all the time, she was really good at giving instruction. She was really good at reteaching, peer reviewing, peer editing, peer critiquing. That was her zhuzh. And so he
Absolutely.
tapped into her talent, and she had no problems. Oftentimes, you know, our teachers, for whatever reason, we label these kids, man, and that's bad because there's not equity. Labeling the kid, that's yeah.
Yeah.
And personally, growing up, man, I had a teacher, right? I won't say this teacher's name, but I had a teacher, and he called me Rowdy Dowdy. And that was my name. Rowdy Dowdy, come here. Every time. Wasn't Andre, wasn't Mr. Dowdy, sir, nothing. He called me Rowdy Dowdy. So for the whole year, I was Rowdy Dowdy. Next thing you know, other teachers are calling me Rowdy Dowdy. Next thing you know, the vice principal thinks that I'm a bad kid because my name was Rowdy Dowdy. And so I was Rowdy Dowdy my entire seventh grade year. I remember confronting this teacher about it. And I was like, "I'm not Rowdy. Yes, my name is Dowdy." He's, "Oh, it just sounds good. It's great. You'll be okay." Like, but no, I really won't, because I'm not Rowdy. You just labeled me. And he continued to label me until my mom had to come up there, and she had to lay it down, Rich. She had to lay it down. But those labels matter. Bringing in those biases, that matters.
Yes.
You got to destroy that. That can't come inside of a classroom or a school.
Absolutely. And I think another part of educational equity can be knowledge of students, right? Being able to understand their context and taking the time. And I will acknowledge as a former elementary school teacher primarily that it's much easier to do when I'm seeing the same students most of the day, every day, as opposed to secondary teacher seeing multiple students for short periods of time. But you have an amazing story, if I remember correctly. It's been years since we talked about it, around your musical interest and how that was kind of elevated or pulled out at a
Yeah,
particular age for you, which I think demonstrates an educator who had at least some formation in their mind around what educational equity meant in the context where you were learning.
yeah. So it reminds me of the quote, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, educator, speaker, all of that. He has a quote, and I use this quote everywhere because it's what shaped my entire educational philosophy. He says this: "If you observe students, they will teach you how to teach them." And so here I am in middle school, a little kid who's tapping on everything, beatboxing on everything, singing, humming, rapping, everything. The pencil, the pen was my snare drum, right? My hand bass on the table, that's all I needed. I can make the beat. All the kids love my beats because I'm musical in some aspect. There's also distraction in class. So
Yes,
I'm often kicked out of the classroom, right? I'm often sitting in the hall. I could do the work. The work was no problem. I got a mom as an educator, so I could do the work. But after doing the work, I would distract the friends and the homies. Now I'm
yeah,
kicked out of class. One time while being kicked out of class, the teacher comes up to me, says, "Man, you out here in the hall again?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, man, I was making noise and beats, rhythms and things. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. He said, come with me. So he takes me to the classroom. He pulls out a musical keyboard. And he was like, so sing me what you just said. And I was like, what you mean? He's like, you said you make beats and things like that. Let me hear it. And I'm like, you want me to like sing? He's like, yeah. So I start to sing, but I can't even remember what it was. But I start to sing it. But he's like, oh yeah, we got to get you in band. We got to get you. Your talent is music. We got to tap you in. And so I'm a saxophone player in 6th grade, and also played the drums. And next thing I know, little did I know at that time, I could play 8 instruments without reading music.
Mhm.
But the beat and the song and all of that was there. And it just took one teacher to tap into the talent and say, oh, yeah, people call you a troublemaker. You're rowdy dowdy, but really, you're Andre, and these beats can be used for good. We can
Yes.
channel this energy in a different way and tap into these talents. And it did. It helped me get a band scholarship to Langston University, the only HBCU here in Oklahoma. And I'm forever grateful for that teacher because he saw more than just rowdy dowdy in me.
Such a great story. I mean,
Yeah,
not only seeing you for who you are, acknowledging and pulling out the best and helping set you up, perhaps removing even some barriers that, as all of us as educators have the power of being able to do in many situations, maybe not all for our students. I think let's get really real right now. You and I
yeah,
are teaching, let's just say in a hypothetical situation. I'm white, you're black. You and I are talking about race. We're both willing to go there and have those hard conversations.
hmm,
What are some topics that you think would be the most important, if you will, invitations to give to folks like myself to join you on this journey of making sure that every single student has access to equitable educational experiences?
yeah. For me personally, I'm just talking for Andre, this guy with the bow tie. For me, it all starts with trust. That's the first conversation we have. Do I trust that you actually going to say what you're going to say and teach what you're going to teach and do what you're going to do? Oftentimes in schools and in academic settings, the teachers are there, but they don't really trust the students. The students don't trust them, so that wall goes up. So whatever conversation they have, in one ear, out the other, because they don't even trust each other to have those conversations. And so that's why it's so important to build culture inside of the classroom as a teacher. That's why it's so important to build a culture inside of the school as an administrator. In order to have the rough conversations of race, of equity in education, of all of those things, your team, your school, your class, your staff, they have to trust each other. If they don't, I could be giving you my heart and sharing you my heart of what America looks like from my skin color, and you won't care. So we got to first build that culture in that way. And that happens through trust. Will you hear what I'm saying? And then after you know who I am as a person, that empathy starts. So you can trust my voice when I say, I don't appreciate when you do that, or I don't like how you framed that. Then you can see that I'm not saying that to attack you. I'm saying that because it really does hurt me. And now you're empathetic towards it.
Yes.
And a lot of times, Rich, kind of what I've seen is, especially like at those staff meetings, right? Elementary, middle school, secondary, even graduate level, even college level, like those staff meetings is just there for informational.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I'm gonna tell you. All right, everybody leave. But you gotta have that classroom. You gotta first build the trust in the culture in that class in order to have those rough conversations.
Man, I
So
think
even
that's
go
so
ahead.
true. No, sorry. I'm so enthusiastic about that. And it also makes me wonder, you and I have talked a lot about different educational protocols for a number of different reasons, project-based learning and other things over time. But I
Yeah.
also wonder, just upon reflection, as we taken that application from teacher to teacher now, in that scenario that we just painted, and we
Hmm.
try to promote the conditions for every student to learn, both for racial reasons, if there's anything else that might be a marker, if you will, for students to be excluded or outed, how do we build structures in place for students, perhaps a protocol or otherwise, to be able to build, if you will, the habits and dispositions to have those uncomfortable conversations, but within a safe space
Yeah.
so that students can move forward and learn about each other to the point that you just made and have empathy for one another.
Yeah, it's about modeling, teaching, remodeling, reteaching, remodeling, reteaching. I liken it into a basketball player. So I'm 6'4", grew up playing baseball and basketball. And my dad would always teach me repetition. He says, when you have a repetition down, everything else is easy. And so here I am. I used to struggle shooting free throws. And he said, repetition, repetition. And every time I would grab the ball, he would say, when you grab the ball, hands got to be palmed, has to have a little arc to it. He says, when you shoot the free throw, elbow has to be tucked inside. It can't be out. It has to be in. When you shoot, you lift with your arm and then the cookie jar. You got to have the follow through, repetition. And so before we even shot a ball, we would go through the motions and go through the motions. Wax on, wax off, right? Karate Kid. Go through the motions. And you're like, why am I going through these motions? It's the practice of it. So you can get familiar to it and with it. Those rough conversations inside of our classrooms are the same way. First has to be modeled. The teacher has to model that. Okay, so class, we're going to read this difficult text here. And while we're reading it, I want us to reflect and think, what do you think is happening? And then perhaps use some of those protocols. What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you wondering? What connections do you have with this text? What personal is it? Text to text, text to self, text to world, like, just modeling it. Even what great readers do. After reading the text, pause. Now you're reflecting on it. What I hear in this text is blah, 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 blah. How this connects to me personally is blah, 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 blah. That really helps. So once these conversations do happen, the students will start tapping into their personal lives. And that's where empathy comes into play. I'll never forget it. Classroom of mine, we were discussing a really difficult text. And in the midst of it, one student said, I really feel this text. And so, our class, we all lean in like, oh, this is about to get good. Share your thoughts. I said, ma'am, you have the floor. And she basically talked about how she was sexually abused growing up. And by her saying that, the room went silent. I mean, you could hear a penny drop on carpet silent. And she spoke her truth. And tears came down, and I grabbed tissues. I'm also on the side texting the counselor, like, get down here. This is great. Come take a look, come grab some strategies and help us. While she's sharing, another brave soul stood up and said, I agree with you. I can feel that because when I was such and such age, it happened to me too. And the more and more students were talking about that abuse, the rest of the class who hadn't been abused had empathy because they could feel the heart and the passion and the presence and the pain of the talk.
Yeah, it's a
But had
great
that class
example.
never ever built the culture, they would have been laughing at them. They would have giggled. You did what? They would have
Right.
probably blamed her. That was your fault because blah, blah, blah. No, once when you build that culture inside the classroom, and once when that class has the trust, and the doors opened up. That classroom, Rich, they are the tightest class I have ever seen. They are still on Instagram and social media. I see them all the time, still together after all of these years, all because they built that trust, had those rough conversations, and that empathy actually brought them closer together.
And Andre, I just want to call out, you have been such a great thought partner for me, such a safe place for me to be able to come and ask questions that are both perhaps a bit embarrassing, but also very raw and real. And it's my responsibility, I believe, to do the work, to think through areas where I can be doing a better job with my peers, with the broader world, with the students, on how I can be more effective to foster educational equity for all students. And what are some tips from your perspective? I'm going to be really raw. As a Black man, how do you navigate being able to be both resilient to have conversations and also at the same time not do the work for someone else? In other words, letting the person kind of sit with the uncomfortable moment of like, yeah, maybe I do that. I need to rethink that.
Yeah. what I do first is I'm always aware of my self-care,
Mm,
because sometimes I am the black face for X group, or I'm the black voice of X teachers, or X amount of administrators, or if I'm in a space or a conference, pre-COVID, uh, I would look around and I would be one or two of the only, people of color in there, or one of only black men in there. And so I know that I would be the voice, the face of the black race, intentionally or unintentionally. And so self care for me in that is first. There are times I just have to walk away, because the conversations, you can tell when people aren't there for growth and they're there to argue. So
yes.
when that happens, it's not worth my time. If you're arguing with me about things that could be Googleable,
Yeah, good
self care
point.
can't take it anymore. I just, when it's other meaningful conversations, um, my rule is two. I'll give you two. And then after the two resources or ideas or strategies or whatever, then I'm going to encourage you to go look it up,
Yeah.
because we got this thing called Google, or we got this thing called YouTube, or whatever it may be. There's so many great resources out there, curated by people who were already doing this work before I
Yes.
was born, during when I was born, and still doing it now.
Absolutely.
But I'll give you two. I'll give you a strategy, an idea, suggestion, something that I've read. And if you would like more, here's some more.
That's so great. Well, one thing I think, Andre, for me is a differentiation between having someone as kind of the guide as an educator and kind of someone that might do the work for me, might tell me how to think, what to do and what not. And to your point, being the person
Hmm.
that might give a resource or two, that's a thought partner in my book, to be able to say, Andre, can I have a conversation with
Yeah,
you about race as an educator? Can I talk about my own practice, with you? I have a question about something very specific, rather than me asking you, hey, Andre, how should white people show up these days? That seems like I'm
yeah.
now putting you on the defensive, or I'm not doing the work at that point. Now, there can be a way to interpret that question differently, I suppose. But it's one thing that I really appreciate that you bring forward in all the circles that you have. And one thing I'd
And
love to
there,
talk about. Oh, go ahead, please jump in.
yeah, I was gonna say there's just different ways of leadership. And I learned this working at the central office. There are some people who need their hands held as you lead them forward. And then once when they get confident enough, they can let their hand go and then they soar. There are others that you just need to tell them one time and they can soar like crazy. It reminds me of a test. It's called the DOPE test, DOPE. And each one stands for a bird: the D for dove, O for owl, P for peacock, E for eagle. And basically, it was like this cute little personality test to kind of show you which type of bird are you and how you could be used in a classroom. But there are some people who are those eagles where you tell them one time, they'll soar high and they can see everything. There are others who need their hand held and they're peacocks. They can be flashy, but they need to make sure that everything is set up before they spread their wings. There are some who's always going to be quiet, like owls, and others who are always going to be peaceful, like doves. And so for me, I'm always weighing that situation in our conversations. There are
Mhm.
some people who need that hand to be held like a dove because they don't want to ruffle feathers. They want to stay peaceful and keep everything peaceful. There are others who are like eagles, where you could say this is inequitable, this is racist, this is a microaggression, and then they'll jump right into it. There's different forms of leadership. And
Yeah.
so I don't hate on the people who immediately attack people, say, oh, you're racist and this is why you're racist. Like, I don't mind that. That's not my leadership style. Mine is more of the, here, I'll give you two reasons why, here's some resources, and then the rest you can find online. Everybody's leadership style is different. Uh,
Yeah. Well, and I think, Andre, you bring up a really good point about that in terms of the differentiation between different leadership
that's just what
styles.
works for me, man.
Oh, yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. And I think, Andre, let's think too, going back to classroom and imagining. One thing that's been on my heart and mind a lot in the last several years is, a lot of times we use a single text or a single resource to maybe represent a very complex issue, whether that be the Civil War to literature to even mathematics. And one of the things, and I'm going to make what might seem to be a bit of a bird walk, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of diversifying curriculum and diversifying resources and their sources in order that not only can differentiation be made to meet the needs of a variety of different learners, but also the authorship and be able to have students see themselves, to your point earlier, in the actual resources. So how do you go about sometimes diversifying kind of the resources that you're getting in front of students? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, for my classrooms, we never had enough books. I'm just gonna shoot straight here. If our class was 36, 37, we maybe had 12 to 20 books. And so I immediately quickly realized we're going to have to go looking for other places to get some information because we just don't have enough books to go around. And of course, we double up, we'd pair up and try our best to do some of those things. I also realized living here in Oklahoma, my Oklahoma students, they didn't experience some of the same issues and same concerns that people perhaps on the West Coast would. Uh, in my opinion, one of the funniest things I remember, first year, entry year teacher, and we're talking about nonfiction text. And so I'm excited, like, oh, we're going to teach nonfiction text. And they were talking about orca whales. And one of my students raised their hand and said, Mr. Daughty. I said, yes. They said, we live in Oklahoma, right? I'm like, of course we live in Oklahoma. He said, there is not an ocean anywhere close by, right? And what he was trying to say was, Mr. Daughty, why are we reading about orca whales? How is that helping us? And then it hit me later on that afternoon. Yeah, I could have grabbed a different text. I could have still done nonfiction, but in their world, they really didn't need to learn about an orca whale that they'll never see unless they go to SeaWorld in San Antonio, which is 8 hours away.
Yeah.
And so that's what started to open up my mind a little bit more, getting out of just the specific books.
Yeah.
I also realized that my students, they wanted to read about themselves and their lives through books. And a lot of the Basils just never did that. I love Judy Blume. I love Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. That wasn't my students.
Sure. Absolutely.
Starting to reach out, asking our librarian media assistants, hey, do you have a book specifically like this, that, and the other? That really helped. The coolest part, and I know I talk a lot, so I do apologize.
No, this is great.
The coolest thing for me was here I am teaching middle school, and we discovered the Bluford series. And the Bluford series spoke to my children like they had never read a book in their life before, because the cover of the book looked like them. The clothes that they wore looked like them. The shoes that they saw on the cover of the book looked like them. And then the story elements in the book were the same issues my students were having. And so we started with one book, I think it was called Someone to Love. And basically, Darcy's living with her grandma and she runs away because life is just too rough. And all of the kids I couldn't get them away from those books, man. And so after the discussion, after pulling out all of the standards and going through, after all of that, I just asked them, why do you all like this book? And one of them was like, Darcy is, and then they named the person in the class. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, you ain't figured this out, Mr. Daughty? The same issue Darcy dealing with is the same issue. And then they named the person's name. And then that's when it connected. Like, our books matter, our content matters.
Yes.
When students can see themselves in that book, in their learning, it matters. When Hidden Figures came out, and you saw 3 Black mathematicians working at NASA, that mattered to so many kids who wanted to be mathematicians, but you only see white men.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
matters. being able to see a Hispanic Latinx scientist, or an LGBTQ plus community writer, or an English person. Like, all of this matters. And this is why, if we're really talking equity, we as teachers got to do the work and diversify our content, diversify our curriculum, diversify our community members coming in to visit to talk to our schools, and all of those things.
Andre, this is hard work,
Yes,
and yet so important.
yes.
And how do we create ourselves as educators? What are some insights around being an ally, if you will,
Mhm.
in our communities? What does that look like?
Yeah. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, Ice Cube. So you always self-check first. My self-check are one or two things. First thing, social media. Look at your friends on social media. Do they all look like you? Do they all sound like you? Do they all believe just like you? And if so, bust the move. Find you some more social media friends. Find me, I'll be your friend. We can start that way. That's why I love my social media accounts. I openly share truth. I want to be that bridge. I know I have a lot of conservative friends. I know I have a lot of liberal friends. I live in the Bible Belt of Oklahoma. So there's a whole bunch of church folk that I grew up knowing here. I also have a lot of militant folk here. I also have family members who are agnostic and don't believe, or they have different faiths and different religions. I want to be that bridge. I want us all to have that empathy, but those conversations don't start till we build trust. So the first thing, check yourself. Look around your circles. Look at your social media. Do they all look, think, sound like you? If so,
Mm.
you got to bust the move.
Well, Andre,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, please go.
Yeah. The second thing is still a check yourself, but look at your family, look at your friends, look at that inner circle, look at the people with you work, who you work with. Look at like your administrative staff. Look at your look at your colleagues. If I am a principal at a school and all of my teachers look the same, I gotta bust the move. I need to reach out to this HBCU or to this school and say, I am looking for diverse candidates to be teachers at my school. You got to bust the move. If you are a principal, it's the exact same thing. If you are a super admin and you are looking for principal candidates, you got to bust the move. Where are you going for these recruiting fairs? Are you going to the schools that you know have always been a part of your friends and your family? Are you reaching out? There was one school in here in Oklahoma, school district here in Oklahoma, Oklahoma City Public Schools, and they needed teachers who could speak in Spanish. A lot of Hispanic population here, Latinx families moving in here, and so like there's a lot, and I can't speak Spanish, and there are so many others who cannot. Oklahoma City Public Schools went to Spain and recruited teachers from Spain to come to Oklahoma to teach. Now, I don't know how much they offered and all of that because I don't know. But what I do remember is they had about 20 teachers from Spain to come to Oklahoma to teach. So, what other districts are going that route to diversify candidates? Soups,
Yeah.
superintendents. You know that there are principals who are well qualified. Is there a specific type that you're looking for? How are you diversifying this thing? Administrators, leaders, organizations. If your staff and your upper administrators all look the same, y'all gotta bust the move. Gotta bust the move, man.
Andre, I love that. And I think what I'd love to do in summary is just kind of wrap up what we've talked about. We started at the system level. We talked about setting the conditions of trust, being able to
Yeah.
also have really discrete representations of the demographics that we're serving, something diverse that's even if that's not represented in our actual community, being
Yeah.
able to expose folks. We talked specifically about being able to bring in not only text and other resources, but also making space for educators to get to know their students, to get to
Mhm.
make sure that they're seen and heard, especially students that might not quote unquote fit in the normal mold. whatever that
Right.
might mean within their learning community based off of how they learn, how they work, their culture. It could be a variety of different things. We also talked about having those hard conversations, between peer to peer as far as educators, and being able to set up the conditions for students even to learn through modeling. And then what I absolutely loved, Andre, is that we brought it all the way down to probably at the very beginning, which is really our own selves, where we
Mhm.
are as individuals and taking ownership in our own growth and being willing, I think, to be vulnerable to own the fact that we don't know everything. We haven't been in every culture, and we at one level can't be, but being open to reading, open to researching, open to just asking questions, even of the families we serve. What are the holidays that are important to you? So that you know that before going into the year. Things like that, so that you're really making sure that all students feel welcome. So with that, Andre, I want to say a huge thanks for being here. Thanks for being a friend. Thanks for being a thought partner. And most
Absolutely.
importantly, thanks for having this really raw and honest conversation today around educational equity and thinking about it in a really systemic manner, from the systems to educators, students, all the way down to us as individuals.
Yeah.
And we'll be posting your contact information on the screen in just a moment. But before we go, do you want to just give us a quick update about how people can follow up with you and a little bit more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I am Andre Doughty. What you see here is what you get. I've learned to be myself in education because that's what matters. Instead of me trying to be someone else or replicate someone else, there are students who are just like me, with the pen, with the pencil, and making the beats and being funny and silly and goofy and still learning. And so when I found my voice this way, I wanted to keep it because that's who I am authentically. You can find me on all of the social medias. Andre Daughty, AndreDaughty. And also, my wife and I, we have a podcast called See What Had Happened. And basically, there are stories in education, from the good, the bad, and everything in between. And these are teachers and educators and parents sharing the stories and their triumphs and their victories and their silly moments in education. So you can find any of those anywhere where your podcasts are: Apple, Play, Google, Spotify, all those good things as well. Yeah, we're out there.
It's awesome. Well, Andre, thank you so much. Look for Andre, hopefully at a EdTech conference or other conference near you. He is out there speaking,
Yeah.
both doing keynotes as well as session presentations. He does a lot of training, professional development with folks that is very, very effective. So all that to say, Andre, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.